In the Pokemon world, there has been one question circling our minds for almost a year. What are the starter Pokemon in Pokemon Legends ZA? This is a question I'm sure you've all been wondering the answer to, and I've done some extensive analysis to uncover the truth. Let's dive in. With 9 generations of starter Pokemon to choose from, there's quite a few options Pokemon could explore for this new journey set in Kalos and Lumio City. And Pokemon Day is just a few weeks away, at which point we're likely to get some new information about Pokemon Legends ZA and also the starter Pokemon going alongside it. Pokemon Legends Arceus set a precedent that we'd start this adventure with a mix and match of starters from other regions. So which combination are we most likely to see? Well, let's get the obvious ones out of the way first. Cyndaquil, Rowlet, and Oshawott are off the table. These starters debut in Pokemon Legends Arceus, and they all got new forms as their final evolutions. This is something I'm particularly excited about because the new forms of Hisuian Samurott and Typhlosion are both pretty sweet. It's very likely that whatever the new starter Pokemon are for Legends ZA, they'll also get some sort of new special treatment, whether it be a new evolution for the region, which means they kind of type shift and change elements, or perhaps they'll actually get a Mega Evolution, which we'll talk about next. I think ultimately as we work through this process, we should probably remove any starter Pokemon that have Mega Evolutions already. These Pokemon have already been highlighted in other games, like in the Kalos region and the Hoenn region, and in my opinion, it's very unlikely that these are going to be the starter Pokemon again. Charmander got 2 Megas, so let's toss him out. Torchic, Bulbasaur, Trico, Squirtle, and Mudkip, they're all off the table, unfortunately. While it is possible that these Pokemon ultimately are starters in this game and get new evolution lines or Mega Evolutions, it's pretty unlikely. I think more so it's possible that we're gonna have a second starter option like we did in Pokemon X and Y, where Sycamore gives you a Charmander, a Bulbasaur, or a Squirtle. It's very possible that Sycamore or someone else will give you one of the starters in the Kalos region that you would otherwise would have gotten, like Fennekin or Froakie or maybe even Chespin. And speaking of those, it's worth noting that those original Kalos starters could get more love here in the Kalos region. Whether they're gifted to you at a midpoint in the game or they're your starters in general, it's very possible that these Pokemon get a new evolution, or what's more likely is they get a Mega Evolution as their cherry on top, but I do think that's kind of unlikely. On a side note, a Fire Fairy form of Delphox could be really cool, or even Mega Chestnut. Again, I do think it's unlikely that these are our primary starters in the game, but it's something to keep in mind. So far we've eliminated all of the starter Pokemon that have Mega Evolutions. We've also eliminated all of the starter Pokemon that are originally in the Kalos region, and I think considering that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are the most recent games in the franchise, Fuecoco, Sprigatito, and Quaxly are probably not going to be in this conversation either. With them having just released in their own main title, it would be kind of weird for Pokemon to kind of reinvigorate those by giving them starters in this upcoming game. And if they were going to highlight them in a bigger way, they would have done it during Gen 9. It's safe to say that these are not going to be our starters in Legends ZA. I honestly think that this same logic can be applied to the Galar region and the starters there. Scorbunny, Grookey, and Sobble are pretty unlikely in this situation. I know that might seem a bit lazy to just cut them off, but ultimately I don't see a world where Pokemon looks to reuse these starters that were so recently introduced into the mainline console of the Nintendo Switch. So believe it or not, that actually leaves us with just a few options. For Fire, we've got Chimchar, Tepig, and Litten, and for Grass, we've got Chikorita, Turtwig, and Snivy, and Totodile, Piplup, and Popplio round out the lineup for Water in terms of possible options left. Another piece of information that's worth evaluating is that Cyndaquil was Generation 2, Rowlet Generation 6, and Oshawott Generation 5. To me, it makes the most sense that these 3 starters would represent 3 different generations, like we saw in Legends Arceus. That's really the precedent we have to go off. I think given the timing of Legends Arceus and the release of Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, it made a lot of sense for Generation 4 to not be represented in Legends Arceus in terms of the starter Pokemon, as that would be very redundant to the game that had released 1 or 2 months prior. But I do think that there's a very big possibility that Generation 4 gets represented in this game as a callback to that time period and having those starters get represented again. With that being said, there is a case to be made to not include the Gen 4 starters here, but I'm pretty sold on the fact that at least one of them is going to make the cut. And with that being said, our Generation 4 starters of Chimchar, Turtwig, or Piplup, my guess is that one of these is going to be a Legends ZA starter, but which one? Each one of these starter Pokemon has had their time to shine. Chimchar being a fan favorite with its evolution Infernape, Turtwig being a rock-solid contender, and Piplup just being an absolute cutie and companion to Dawn. I think any of these could make for a great starter Pokemon in Legends ZA. But I've run the calculations, I've done the math, I've consulted with the people, I've talked to my uncle who happens to work at Nintendo, and they've told me what the starter Pokemon are. Or at least my best prediction anyway. I now present to you the 3 starter Pokemon in Pokemon Legends ZA. Can I get a drum roll, please, editor? I believe that your final starter Pokemon for Pokemon Legends ZA are going to be Chimchar as your fire starter, Snivy as your grass starter, and Totodile as your water starter. I think it's important that each of these starters represent different animals and come from different parts of life and have kind of a uniqueness to them to encourage trainers to pick the one that best suits them. And I think this lineup actually does so in a very elegant and awesome way. And I can also see these 3 Pokemon being reimagined as getting either Mega Evolutions or getting new evolution forms like we saw with the Hisuian forms before. I'm really curious if this aligns with your vision for Pokemon Legends ZA and what starters you're hoping to be able to choose from. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you only need one of them to hit because that's going to be the one you pick, but I'm really curious what your predictions are for the 3 starter Pokemon in this upcoming game. The good news is we shouldn't have to wait very long as the trailer for Pokemon Day is just a few weeks away, so make sure you guys follow the channel and subscribe so you don't miss out on our Pokemon coverage here. I'll get you guys with the leaks, rumors, updates, and much, much more, and we'll find out who these starters are actually going to be in just a few weeks' time. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.